I'm a little worried that I'm starting to see a trend. Hi friends, today I'm going to be reviewing The Sight by Melanie Golding. I read this book digitally, so I do not have a copy in my possession, which is why you have a beautiful graphic here, hopefully. Maybe so. If you're new to my channel, I want to say welcome, thank you for watching, and to remind you that this review will be done in two parts. The first part will be spoiler free, so no worries if you haven't read the book yet. There's nothing most of the time, unless there's an animal involved, I don't spoil the book. And then I will warn you and do a spoiler portion at the end where I'll go more into detail about my thoughts on the book with specifics. Okay, first up, the synopsis that I wrote. Faith didn't want it to come, but it did, just as she dreamt it the night before. Her brother is swallowed by the frozen lake, sucked under when the ice breaks. His cold body pulled out moments later, but it was too late. When word gets out that she saw it all happen, Faith is viewed as a pariah. She and her mom are removed from the family's traveling circus. They can't take a chance. The last time someone had the sight, people died. It's a curse, a plague, and everyone who joins the circus has to promise that nothing of the Charlotte nature will ever be done. Years later, Faith has returned. She performs every night, that fateful day a thing of the past, and it will stay that way if she keeps her eye patch on. But when one of the other circus performers collapses during a performance, Faith tries to ease her friend's pain by telling her that her father won't die that night. Word gets out about what she's done, and soon Faith is shunned again, forced to provide for her ailing mother. Desperate, nothing stops her from using her gift again for money. Each time takes its toll, begging her to question where the gift is from and why she is suddenly seeing herself in the visions. Okay, going back to my comment at the beginning of this video, I'm starting to see this trend with horror books. And maybe it's because I dove headfirst into horror books through last month, the month of October, when I did my horror reading challenge. So I'm reviewing all of the books that I read during October. But I'm seeing this trend where people are coming up with these really interesting ideas and things that hook me in, and I'm like, yes, this is different, unique, and new, but then they are not pulling off the ending or, to be honest, providing anything, any substance to the story to tell me why things are happening the way that they're happening. So we have this idea. Faith has a gift, something that awoke into her when she was a child, the night before she saw her brother's death. In a dream, she didn't think anything of it until the next day. Everything played out to the T as she saw it in her dream. Then, this is something that harkens back to her great-great-grandmother. Her great-great-grandmother also had a supposed gift. It wasn't the same as Faith, but it's something that existed. And horrible things happened when her great-great-grandmother was around, and so this whole family history comes out about how her great-great-grandmother, I'm saying too many greats. How her great-grandmother was shunned, how death followed her, all of this stuff. And how it started this essentially pact that people had to sign in the traveling circus about they will not perform any of these acts of fortune telling or anything that uses the gifts that, say, Faith and her great-grandmother would possess. This book started out having everything for it. We got the spooky setting, it's set in a carnival, it's set in England, we have this crazy creepy gift of where she can see how people are going to die if she meets them in the night. Like, it's perfect. It really was something up my alley that I wanted to read. It also wasn't too scary, which is great for people who want more of that spooky book, but they don't want something to scare them at the end of the day. However, there was nothing to hold this story together. Essentially, I like to say there was no skeleton to the body. It was all just flesh and skin that crumpled in the merest touch of being questioned as to why things were happening. Where does this all come from? Why is it? What are the rules of this world? Why does it exist in this way? Why is it yada yada yada? There's so many whys. Why? I'm frustrated. There's so many whys that I want to tell you guys, but I can't unless we get to the spoiler version because I don't want to spoil it for you all. So if you also have read this book or you really want to know what it is, don't worry, I'll say why are some of these whys happening in the second half of the review. For now, just know that there are tons of questions posed in this book and they're not answered. I very much felt that I read this book and had no payoff whatsoever in the end. I almost felt that it was a waste of time because I'm reading it and I'm like, but why? Are you going to answer these questions at the end? That's one of the things I love about these horror-y books is that we have all these weird questions congealing and coming together, and then we're supposed to get to, say, the end, and all of our questions are going to be answered, and they weren't. Maybe this wouldn't have bothered me so much if Golding didn't hit me over the head with the great-grandmother story. Constantly, this story is referenced over and over about what happened to Faith's grandmother, what happened to her great-grandmother, how this affected her, how her life path is having the same trajectory in a way, how the circus is treating her in the same way that they treated her great-grandmother. And this is such a big integral part to the story that to not really harken back to the reason why certain things are happening the way they're happening, especially when it comes to the end and one of the big reveals is done, it needed more. If someone's coming up with a great story, you came up with a great story, so let's follow through with that great story. And why did you come up with this story? Okay, if you're an author and you're a writer and you want to write a story and you came up with this amazing idea, how did you come up with it and why? What is the inciting incident in your head of why this happened the way it happened? That needs to be on the page, because if you came up with it and you're explaining it in your head of everything that's going to happen, then that also needs to be on the page for everyone else. On the plus side to the book, some reason, and it's probably because I kept wanting to know what the answers were, I kept reading this book. I really did appreciate the parts of the book that were set in the circus, so they were small and not as expansive as I would have really liked to experience the circus side of the story. I just kept reading. I wasn't a big fan. There's definitely a lot of flash forwards and backwards, and though I appreciated the beginning story that represented her and what happened to her brother, and I think that was important and included, sometimes it just felt that the back and forth just weren't needed. All we needed to see, even if we needed to see it, was the moment that she had with her brother and the lake. I'm not so sure everything else needed such intimate, close betrayal of seeing the scene playing out of the past stories, and it was just a little confusing at times as well. There was also another point of view in the book, as you will see, and it doesn't really help anything at all either. You'll find out some stuff later, but looking back at it now, maybe you will have guessed it better, but I don't think it played anything into the story. Now, when it comes to the plot twists and the interweaving of the characters and the backstories of the characters and the creation of the characters themselves, I think this is where all of Golding's energy went, because it was very well done and I really appreciate it. There are a couple of twists and turns in the book that had me surprised, a little in a good way, and all of that exciting things. And I think that's also why I kept reading, because I did like the characters. They were not cookie cutter. They were not just gray. They had some depth and some substance to them. And so I appreciated being able to see their trials and tribulations. I appreciated the twists and turns that you'll see play out in the book as well. There were just a lot of really good thematic elements, a lot of really good descriptors in the book, and so I think this is why I did end up keep reading it, even though in the end I just kind of put the book down and was like, why did I waste my time in this? Especially when it came to just some of the things that Golding just kept hitting me over the head with, and even the fact of how she was contradictory in a way with her rules that she had shown at the beginning of the book, especially when it came to Faith and the circus and the rules about not doing any of this, her sight, all her abilities, not performing any of that, and how it was kind of oh, well, maybe we'll let you back again. It was just very hard when it's just this is the hard line in the sand, and she broke the rules, okay? And lastly, even though I loved the characters, there just wasn't much of a character arc. My description of saying that this story is just a body without a skeleton, that is literally what I meant. There's just, I needed more depth, I needed more explanation, I just needed more. We had a great atmosphere, we had all this stuff, and yet there just wasn't any real substance to hold this story together and to make it something better with this great idea that Golding had. Okay, friends, now is time for the spoiler portion of the review, so click away, ruin my metrics, it's okay. When you read the book or whatever, come back later, watch this part of the video to hear more about the spoilers. So yes, I really, really loved the plot twist. I loved that Betty, I believe it was Betty, Faith's friend was actually her great-grandmother that whole time. I really appreciated the betrayal of her cousin at the circus, taking away everything and then essentially buying it back. I thought that was a great dynamic in all of it as well. But the great-great-grandmother portion, I say too many greats. The great-grandmother portion of the book was so confusing. Who the fuck is this great-grandmother? Why was she alone when they found her? What, did she make a spell to lure in Faith's great-grandfather and to get to like make him fall in love with her? What's going on? Why is it that she was able to not pass on when she died, but to become latched on to Faith? And why is it when Faith poked her eye out, why is that when the grandmother suddenly shows up? Did it have something to do with her? Like, did she do something to Faith to make all this play out? And like, why isn't Faith blind? See what I mean? I told you there's so many freaking whys when I was reading this book, and that frustrated the crap out of me. Why this? Why that? Why was Faith different than the great-grandmother? And why couldn't the great-grandmother see Des? Or could she and she didn't? Okay, so could the great-grandmother see Des the whole time but she didn't tell anybody? And that's why she showed up in the curtain to see the death of the I think that was like either her daughter or her daughter-in-law. Okay, all right, you got me there. In a way, though, I did appreciate that Faith was stabbing her eye out. That was probably one of my favorite parts of the book, per se, only because it felt so realistic and understandable for a child her age and everything that happened and the curse that it honestly felt to her that she would want to stab her eye out. This is the point. I love shows and television where the reader is clearly thinking these thoughts in their head, and then the person who writes the story says, okay, why not? Let's go there. Let's go where your brain's taking it. I'm going to go that extra length and make it happen. And so I really did appreciate that. But again, why was that the moment that the aunt or great-grandmother showed up? The characters were just woven really, really well. Even the fact that the boy's brother, Shane, Samuel, whatever his name is. I don't have the book to look this up. Okay. Even the fact that he comes back later and runs into her and it's like, oh, this is her, and then wants some sort of revenge for his brother's death, and then finding out that it was actually her that spurred this whole thing on, putting the question in of whether or not she made the dream happen or not, and this whole death thing. It's just very interesting, and I didn't like that portion of the book as well. But it was so muddied in the mix of everything, all the other problems that were happening, that I was just, at that point in the book, I didn't care anymore. And when I got to that point, it was just like, well, I'm this far and I'm going to finish it to count the book on my list of reading. But I don't care. Just end already. Well, that's all, folks. There's just thoughts. There are a lot of thoughts, but thank you so much for listening. If you are wanting more content, make sure to check out my other book reviews. I also co-host a podcast where we talk about our artist journeys, other content recaps, and we have a monthly horror book club. So make sure to check that out also on this page, and I hope that you have a magical reading day.